the ballers? What's going on? It's Preacher, and it is my pleasure to bring to you the Resto Shaman Guide for 5.4. Finally, we've waited that whole expansion, as we always do as a Resto Shaman, is we have to wait, sit back, watch everyone else have the glory of their moment in the sun. But we always know as a Resto Shaman, when it comes to the end of the expansion, you're going to be coming knocking on our door and saying, please come back. Please come back. And that is exactly what has happened, as the Resto Shaman has now really come into its own, especially in 5.4. It suffered very early on in the expansion. In the middle, they were kind of mid-ish, and now they're a prominent presence in most raids, and you're taking at least one. You're taking at least one, because they bring so many cooldowns and so many attributes to a raid that it'd be ridiculous not to carry one with you. Such a wonderful class. Gameplay-wise, they're pretty good. I wouldn't rate them up there with the Mistweavers or the Resto Druids, but I'd certainly say they're something to enjoy, and therefore, if you're thinking about trying out a little bit of healing, these guys kind of have it all. They have a lot of tools in the back. Not quite as many as a Priest, but they still have plenty of stuff to benefit an entire raid and lots of choices to make themselves better, be it 10-man or 25-man. So we're going to go over your talents. I'm going to go over your gearing choices, and then more importantly, we're going to go over your gameplay, and then we're going to do a gameplay run. We'll go through probably an LFR or something like that and show you all these kind of things in actions and where your decisions come from to be a good healer. Because the big question about healing isn't a rotation as such. A lot of people get confused by this, like, what is my rotation as a healer? It is about reacting to what is about to happen in your raid and therefore being able to cope with that situation. So let's look at our talents. I'm going to skip through these pretty briefly. I talked about them extensively in the Elemental Guide. I'll point out things that are mainly Resto related. Astral Shift is generally your go-to. It's such a wonderful ability to take 40% less damage, 1.5 minute cooldown, amazing. Windwalk Totem is also amazing if the raid encounter requires it. As with most talents, it's what does this fight demand of me? How can I adapt my character to be better at this particular fight? That's why we carry a ton of tomes of the Clear Mind in order to switch our talents on demand. But Windwalker Totem is generally the one that's called upon. Level 45 is where we really get a choice. It's generally between either Call of the Elements or Totemic Projection. But of course, Call of the Elements does reset things like our Healing Stream Totem, which is in fact an incredible cooldown, something we're going to be using on cooldown pretty much. And Call of the Elements allows us to reset that, get some more healing streams on the go and such. Wonderful thing. Bear in mind, it does not work on totems that have a cooldown longer than 3 minutes, so your major ones aren't really going to get a look in, which is a little bit sad. Totemic Projection is also cool if you're going to lay out totems spread out across a raid, or you want to move them and you don't want to waste that cooldown and such. Again, completely down to what your raid demands of you, okay? What does this raid need of me? Level 60, we have a cooldown. Now, unfortunately, Echo the Elements doesn't work, because what we're after as a healer, as always as a healer, is generally, especially Mr. Pandaria, it's about burst reaction and being able to cope when the big spell of death occurs on our raid. It's not exactly the funnest mechanic. I've got to say, I don't really like the way that it's kind of single target and then AoE splurge coming all over everybody's face. That kind of aspect of it. And as such, Echo the Elements is a little bit random and doesn't allow us to cope with that situation as much as we would like. Ancestral Swiftness is a little bit boring for what it does. Your next nature spell with a base casting time less than 10 seconds becomes instant cast, passive, 5% spell haste, and 10% melee haste. So obviously the melee haste, not really interesting to us at all. 5% spell haste, it's good if you're trying to reach a certain haste cap. Now, you're going to have to check an add-on for this kind of stuff. Working it out by the numbers is incredibly boring and incredibly tedious. What we are looking for is haste caps that give us things like extra ticks on our Riptide and whatnot. What we're looking at there is if you need that extra haste, then maybe Ancestral Swiftness is good for you. If you don't need that, you're pretty much going to roll with Elemental Mastery, which is that flat 30% haste. Also works in line with what I was saying earlier about reacting to that big splash damage, that big incoming damage, and we can pop an Elemental Mastery. It does in fact give an extra tick on Healing Tide, which is awesome. I read that on one of the Icy Banes guides, so well pointed out on that. And also, mainly, for getting that kind of stuff, it allows us to be more effective during the dangerous moments, okay? What we want when a raid is taking heavy damage is good, solid healers who are coping with that situation, and this Elemental Mastery works so well in that regard. As I said earlier, Healing Stream Totem is just absolutely amazing, so why wouldn't we take Rushing Streams? You're going to see Healing Stream Totem actually prop up as one of your top healing spells that you produce if you're using it effectively. Your Healing Stream Totem now heals 2 targets at once for 15% additional healing. As we're going to be using Healing Stream Totem on cooldown, then we're going to see a huge benefit from the rushing streams, passively doing work, no extra key bindings, just absolutely just trolling the crap out of everything. At level 90, it's kind of the default choice of Primal Elementalist. However, I do want to give a little bit of a shout out to Unleashed Fury. It depends again on what the fight actually demands of you, okay? Unleashed Fury means that we're going to be using Unleash Elements pretty much on cooldown anyway. We're going to be doing that in our normal gameplay. With Earth-Living Weapon, which is of course our weapon imbue, you'll further increase the effectiveness of your next single target heal on the target ally by 50%. That's enormous, okay? That is absolutely enormous. And there are periods and fights where the tank is taking significant amounts of damage in comparison to the raid, and it's always on demand and when we can predict it, okay? Those big smashes that are coming down is like, you know, you can see Garrosh prepares his big blade of death to smash you in the face. This counters that very effectively, and with such a short cooldown, you can pull off some pretty tremendous things. However, in general, Primal Elementalist is the way to go. Now, your Primal Elementalist is going to give you extra benefits for when you cast your Fire Elemental Totem and your Greater Earth Elemental Totem, alright? Now, in order to use this effectively, we're actually looking for the buffs which are Empower, alright, and Reinforce. These are the extra buffs that your pets will gain. As such, you kind of need a macro to go along with this. I've seen about 6 different variations across websites and whatnot. I spoke to a shaman earlier on Skype who's in an endgame guild, and he said, yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can use this. I kind of prefer just the simple is easiest. That's always the way I like to rock, and always the way I like to tell you guys is simple but effective. As such, my macro for this is this. I cast a Fire Elemental Totem, and I also cast target equals bang, empower, or reinforce. Now, what this means is my one key binding cast my Fire Elemental, and then when I press it again, I get the Empower buff. You can see there that my Fire Elemental is channeling this onto me, and my Power buff actually increases my healing done by 10%, okay? So if I was then to pop my Earth Elemental, which I can't, obviously, it's on a 1 minute cooldown, and then press that same button again, obviously I can't cast off another Fire Elemental, but I will also get the Reinforce buff, which again decreases my damage taken and also gives me that healing benefit. So I actually think simple is better. I want this buff on me. I want that extra benefit. Really works out nicely. So that's the talent that's going to work very well with your general raiding setup. You're going to have your Fire Elemental on a very low cooldown, which is just fantastic. Let's talk about our glyphs, which go hand in hand with that. Of course, the glyph of Fire Elemental Totem. Reduce the cooldown and duration of your Fire Elemental Totem by 50%. This is fantastic synergy, because those periods of heavy, dangerous damage don't actually last that long, right? They tend to be over in a very few amount of seconds. So you might have 10 or 15 seconds there of serious danger, and then we've decided to cope with it. The rest of the healers are coping with it as well, and therefore we're now in a good shape. And then we get to use our Fire Elemental Totem again in a very short cooldown. So I just want to show you again with the Earth Elemental. I drop him, and there I go. I press the same button again. You can see that's coming there, and I get damage taken reduced by 20%. Also bear in mind that buff, and again, healing done increased by 10%. Wonderful pair of cooldowns that you're adding to your normal rotation. Nice, simple, effective macros. So just bear in mind that you get to do that if you want the benefit of the healing done to yourself. Glyph of Healing Stream, we're going to be, again, I can't say enough about Healing Stream. It's so fucking good, man. When your Healing Stream totem heals an ally, remember it now heals 2, it also reduces their Fire, Frost, and Nature damage taken by 10%. Again, bear in mind, with your Glyphs as a Resto Shaman, there are a lot of choices. There are certainly a lot of choices, but if we've got magical damage in some form, and it's not Shadow, then of course this is going to be beneficial to us all round, because we're going to have that Healing Stream totem down a hell of a lot. So it's worth noting. Glyph of Riptide, this is my general glyph setup. This is what I roll with. Glyph of Riptide, I love Glyph of Riptide. We're going to be keeping it at least on 2 tanks. In general, there's very rare occasions where it's a single tank. We're going to keep Riptide on 2 tanks. And also while we're moving around, we get to keep some hots on, which then benefits our chain heal and whatnot, as they are buffed by Riptide. If you didn't know that, your chain heal is definitely buffed by Riptide, so we can throw around a lot of Riptides very quickly and keep those ticking on the tanks as a nice solid hot. A couple of shout outs to go out to where is it? Glyph of Chaining is the one. Telluric Currents, if you're struggling with your mana, the Resto Shaman has that wonderful ability to never have nothing to do, right? It's so cool. They never have nothing to do. Just think about that for a moment when you see those healers in your party or your raid who just stand there going, God, I've got nothing to do now. I'll just wait till people take damage. Resto Shaman never have that problem. They really don't. You could just cast some lightning bolts, and if you've got the Glyph and Telluric Currents, you'll actually regenerate mana while doing so. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Glyph of Totemic Recall. There is a little trick with your healing stream totem if you can be asked. Yeah, that's the important bit. If you can be asked, is that if you wait till the very last tick of your healing stream totem and then use Totemic Recall, you'll actually refund 100% of the mana. It doesn't cost that much anyway. Right? It doesn't cost that much anyway. Where are we? Healing stream totem, 14,000 mana? Yeah. It's not that much. It's not that much. But over the course of a fight, we're going to be using it on cooldown. It does add up. So if you are having mana issues, then maybe you can roll with a Totemic Recall. Have a little bit of a practice with it, but what I can guarantee you is when you're under heavy fire, is you're probably going to forget to do that, because quite frankly, it's more important to keep the raid alive. Glyph of Chaining is the other one. I haven't even bothered with it. I've not needed it. Simple as that. But I would certainly take this and have it in my inventory if I was full-time raiding on this guy. Increases the jump distance of your Chain Heal spell by 100%. Gives that spell a 2-second cooldown. Kind of a hefty trade-off, because Chain Heal is fantastic. Absolutely fucking astonishing amount of healing. However, if your raid is all spread out all over the place, you're obviously going to see a huge benefit from the fact that your Chain Heal can jump so much further. Okay? Let's talk about your gearing. Now, I just want to preface this. I'm going to preface this by saying this guy is geared for Elemental. As such, I'm not going to regem him, because after I've done the Resto guide, he's going to be switching straight back to Elemental, because that is where the fun is, in my opinion. What you're going to be doing is getting as much spirit as possible. Very easy for a Resto Shaman to actually run into mana trouble, especially if you're constantly healing. If you look at things like Mana Tide, they cost, Healing Rain, I should say, they cost a lot of mana. They really do cost a lot of mana to keep those things on cooldown. Now what... I'll talk about that in the gameplay. Allow me to carry on. So what you're aiming for is some haste caps. Okay, some haste caps for your Riptide and whatnot. Again, use an add-on like Reforge Light or Check Ask Mr. Robot, because quite frankly, that kind of stuff shouldn't interest you in checking the numbers, because all kinds of crazy things happen in a raid that you will not be able to measure outside of the raid, and you can make mistakes, and it's really boring and annoying, and you don't want to do that. So, bear in mind, you're trying to reach some haste caps. And if you're struggling to reach a haste cap, then a little bit of haste gemming is going to get you there. Beyond that, you're going for as much spirit as you possibly can to avoid any kind of mana issues. And critical strike, okay? Critical strike is your best stat. I'm currently gemmed for mastery. Mastery is kind of the worst stat, unfortunately. It's all bear in mind, okay? There's a definite point where deep healing can come in handy. Resto Shamans are one of those classic classes that have regemmed in between fights, yeah? Depending on how the fight works. If your raid is constantly at low health all the time, then deep healing actually becomes very, very potent. It becomes incredibly powerful because your raid is so low on health. In general, that's not really the way it works in Mr. Pandaria's. People are very powerful and very capable of turning their healing up to fucking 12 when needed, and the raid gets topped very quickly. As such, the power of your mastery actually diminishes, and critical strike rating will be better. So spirit and crit in general, once you get a reasonable amount of gear, you'll be easily hitting the haste caps. No need to worry about that. So gameplay wise, a couple of things to bear in mind. You obviously want your water shield on, and you want to keep your earth shield on the target. So have some way of tracking earth shield. This is going to be easier to show you in a raid, obviously. So water shield on yourself. I'm just going to get myself in combat here. I've got several tell me whens here for my Resto Shaman, because I think they're all very important. So this is Healing Stream. Healing Stream essentially on cooldown, okay? Have a little tracker. You see I've got a little tracker down here for it as well, just to keep an eye out on when Healing Stream is going to be necessary, because it puts out so much healing. Then we have our massive amounts of raid cooldowns. We've got Healing Tide Totem, which is just insane. Spirit Link. Oh my god. We've then got Mana Tide, and then we've got Ascendance on top of that. And these synergize in a crazy way, guys. I suggest you get into some LFRs and whatnot, and just play around with how your spells synergize together. Good examples are things like Spirit Link and Ascendance mixed together. Crazy, because people aren't at 100% health. Boof, you just put out idiot amounts of healing. Healing Tide Totem, obviously planning that. Healing Mana Tide Totem. All these things are huge supports for your raid. Absolutely huge supports. I also track my Unleash Elements and my Healing Rain. Okay? If you're going to be spamming a lot of Healing Rain, you always want to use it in conjunction with that Unleash Elements. It doesn't line up perfectly. So it's going to be like every other Healing Rain. If you're having to keep Healing Rain down 100% of the time, then you're going to have to do some mix and matching with what you're going to do. You can see they kind of don't line up ideally, which is a little bit of a shame. but still, Unleash Elements, that's going to give it 30% more power, okay? 30% more power going into that healing rain, which is enormous. Especially with the mana cost, you get a lot more bang for your buck by doing that. That doesn't mean that your Unleash Elements is exclusively for Healing Rain. No, if you're not keeping Healing Rain down, you should still be using Unleash Elements because it increases your direct healing by 30%. So even if you're just spamming normal Healing Wave or Greater Healing Wave, what you want to see is use your Unleash Elements to get a lot more bang for your buck again, to make sure even while you're being mana efficient, that you're still getting the extra benefits that your class provides. When it comes to single target healing, we're healing a tank and whatnot, we obviously want to keep, if I was healing myself, I would keep Earth Shield on that target, Riptide on that target, making best use of Tidal Waves, increasing that haste, a critical effect chance of your healing surge and whatnot. You want to keep that down, so don't be afraid to use another hit Riptide. If you're just single target one healing, it's not really the best idea to just keep overwriting your Riptide. You want to throw those Riptides around on the raid. Even if you throw them on someone else, you'll still get that Tidal Waves buff. So you can see I heal the guy over there. I still get the Tidal Waves buffs. Worth making sure you've got that extra haste. You're going to put out a lot more passive healing, which is fantastic. And then also just picking and choosing. Healing is not about a set rotation. It's about picking and choosing what your raid demands. If there's AoE healing, you might throw out some Riptides, but you're mainly going to start switching over to your Chain Heal. Is somebody in serious danger, then you're going to be switching over to Greater Healing Wave or just normal Healing Wave for topping people up. Keeping those Riptides going, keeping an eye on the Tidal Waves, and keeping an eye, obviously, on Earth Shield to make sure that is up as much as possible, okay? Really super important. Also note, again, I did point this out earlier, a lot of people don't realize this because we don't read tooltips, but Riptide increases the caster's chain heal effect by 25%, okay? 25% buff on targets that are chain heal. So if you are chain healing the melee or whatnot, what you're probably going to be doing is actually Riptiding the tank and then chain healing through the tank. The tank's likely to take some damage and then you'll be chain healing through him, getting that extra benefit that comes from him having that Riptide up. What I'm going to do, jump into a raid and talk more easily about this stuff. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you watch the gameplay. Bye.